Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There it is, so you don't miss any of our football content this season. It has been, if I might say, fantastic. Basketball season's here. There's only one place I go for tickets, and that's Game Time. They have a new feature called Game Time Picks. Makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. When I want to go to a basketball game, football game, concert, comedy show, just click on the event you want to attend. Game Time gives me a seat preview, offers me a great deal. I get the best bang for my buck. Game Time also has the lowest prices guaranteed, or they will credit you 110% the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download their app, Game Time app, 90 seconds, create an account, use the code Colin, that's me, C-O-L-I-N, $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply, redeem codes Colin, C-O-L-I-N, $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Our Week 6 reaction presented by Uber Eats. Get almost anything for game day. It's time for this week's player I thought might give almost anything to redo his game, brought to you by Uber Eats. Spencer Rattler, 2 fourth-quarter picks in his pro debut. Started off strong, but the Bucs blew the game open in the fourth. Tampa scored touchdowns after both Rattler picks. That was this week's Uber Eats Player of the Week. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats. I love them. The official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Uber Eats. All right. We got a lot to talk about. Mostly the Cowboys ass kicking. Oh, God, that may have been the worst thing I've seen this year. By the time we're doing this, it was 46-9, and we just decided to do this a few minutes early. So the final score wasn't quite finished. I'm sure Detroit added more to it. John Middlekauff, former NFL scout for the Eagles, 3 and Out podcast for the Volume. I mean, there's a million things. I had said Friday on FS1, the slow oil leak would begin this week with a schedule. Too many good quarterbacks. God, you could tell early. 7-3, Cowboys bad tackling, Dak an end zone pick.
Jeez.
You know, it's my take on Dallas is this roster is, if you're going to pay Dak that kind of money, you have to hit, not just, you have to, 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round picks have to become stars. You have to find a couple Puka Nakuas in the 5th. John, this Cowboy roster is just not very good, is it?
Well, with the injuries they have, they would not beat any good team in the NFC. They would get boat raced when you think about all the good teams in the NFC. All have excellent offenses, right? Detroit, clearly one of the best. They could score 40 on them with their eyes closed. The 49ers, the Packers, the way Washington's playing right now, the Vikings, Caleb, right? The way that offense is humming. So the defense with their injuries stands no chance. If they are going to win, how often do you win a game in which they did last week, which I gave them credit because it was a gritty performance on the road, must win, when the quarterback throws 2 interceptions, he has another fumble, and you get a blocked field goal? It never happens. It shows you how inept last week Fields and that offense was. When he threw the pick today, I said last week, is he one of the more bizarre players? Because obviously he's good and has awesome moments, but then he consistently lets you down in the playoffs. But he's played very well in some huge regular season games that are being watched by 30+ million. He plays for the Cowboys, but God, he throws a lot of picks. That end zone pick then turns into a field goal. So that's a 6-point swing, and then the route's on. And they had if they were going to win today, it was going to have to be like 35-30. And he just kind of imploded and looked like a different guy. And so did their offensive line and all their offensive weapons. Kind of tapped out after about 5 minutes into the second quarter.
I've said, for years, I've compared him to Kirk Cousins with more mobility, but I think Kirk showing it again in Atlanta. Kirk's a better thrower of the football. Kirk doesn't make a ton of mistakes. And frankly,
more accurate.
Just a more accurate thrower of the football. If you asked, right now I get Kirk Cousins. He's got about half of Dak's contract, and he's a better thrower of the football. And so we always love all these mobile quarterbacks, but the truth is with Aaron Rodgers and Dak right now, they're not very mobile. Hell, I watched Baker Mayfield and Bo Nix today. Bo Nix is fast. You don't have to love him, but Jesus, the kid, Brock Purdy moves really well. So I think Mike McCarthy is paying the price for Jerry Jones' ego. An 81-year-old guy who wants to be the general manager, call press conferences. And I've said this before. I just don't know how good of a job this is. You walk into a job. I mean, let's be honest. There's two great jobs to take in this league. You got a star quarterback, and you're going to have to pay him. Or you have a talented rookie quarterback like Caleb or Jaden Daniels on a rookie contract. So now I got to play around with some chess pieces. I can go buy a pass rusher. What you don't want to have is an average guy that you're overpaying. And Kirk Cousins' deal right now is a very solid deal. It's not egregious. They didn't have to get rid of anybody. The Dak deal, which hasn't even started the new one yet, I think this is going to be a downhill trajectory for years, to me.
I do think Jerry's drafted relatively well, though. I mean, they've won 12 games 3 straight years, but they kind of hit the point this year where they lost a bunch of guys in free agency, and they were going to have to double down, obviously, on Dak, and then Micah hadn't even been paid, and they paid CD, so now the team John, becomes an NBA squad.
But let's be honest, though. The last 2 years, Aaron Rodgers leaves the NFC. A lot of these Jordan Loves, a lot of the, Chicago didn't have Caleb. Washington was a mess. San Francisco was great. Detroit was good. Now they're exceptional. The last 2 years, the NFC's had a pretty weak middle and bottom. Well, that's over. Beat up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now Green Bay, Detroit. So there was this window, and we're like, oh, they won 12 games. That's a 9-win team in the AFC.
That's fair because they weren't. Then they'd get into the dance and they would get beat at home by the Niners. They would get rolled at home by the Packers. They would go on the road and get beat by the Niners. So it's like, well, they got their chances with an inflated. Yeah, that is fair because the division was, listen, they always play Philly tight, right? They're probably going to split those games most years. And they got to beat up on Washington and the Giants. And clearly Washington today, to me, was actually a big winner. I was like, damn, they might be a little better than I thought.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm more impressed with them in a loss than I have with some of their, but that's a problem for the Cowboys and the Eagles. Because I'm watching the Eagles today and Sirianni screaming at fans. It's like, hey, Nick, calm down, buddy. I mean, you're barely beating the Browns as like a 10-point favorite at home. Your fans aren't happy with you, and they have a point. And the Cowboys, this was obviously a bad matchup for them, given their injuries, but they're just getting their butt kicked at home. And Dak talked about it this week. He's like, listen, we got to start. We got to take care of business at home. It ain't even close. It ain't even close.
Listen to this. Go back to last year. Packers, Saints, Ravens, Lions have humiliated them at home. Now, those are good teams. That's near the top of the league.
Well, that's to your argument. Then they're 12 wins, a little inflated, and then when you get them against the big boys, they get subtract the Eagles, who they're comfortable playing. They're getting work. Look at the Niners game last year. I mean, what was the final score of that? Like 45-10. They got destroyed.
I think you have to really. This will sound crazy. I would considering. Listen, you're going to pay. They've already paid Dak and CD. Would you consider to get draft capital? You'd get a first-round pick for Micah.
You'd get more than that. I 100%. I've had people ask me, Cowboy fans, should we just do this? What's the point? Our defense isn't even close. Why wouldn't we just start over?
And Hutchison's injury today is heartbreaking for Detroit. But before that injury, he's not Myles Garrett. He's not Hutchison. He's not Nick Bosa. He's not. He's not as big, as strong. He can be overwhelmed by like a Trent Williams. He can disappear in big spots with top tackles. I think Micah, a lot of teams would use an edge rusher. I think you have to think about moving off it, getting a first and a third, and just going into because what Dallas has to find now, John, they got to find cheap, good players. So I do want to say this about Detroit. Tom Brady made a point today, and I thought it was a really good one. He said, Detroit has something that is really special. They can play power football. They can play efficient football with that offensive line. They can play keep away, just grind you out. Or they can throw the ball, but they can also get clever with Ben Johnson. It's a really fun offense for players. It's very rare, John. Usually you have to pick your spots, and they don't have a mobile quarterback. But shit, they can road grade you. They can go over the top with Williams. They do trick plays with Ben Johnson. Hutchison's injury is just devastating and gutting. But I got to tell you, there's not a lot of offenses in the league that can beat you like 6 ways. I thought it was a good point. Detroit, I mean, Dallas today had no answers and
Yeah.
plus injuries, but they did 7, 8 different ways to beat you.
Well, with McCaffrey out, it's the most complete offense in the league. And one thing they even had over the 49ers last year is their offensive line is just better. I mean, Brady mentioned it. Penei Sewell's the best right tackle in the NFL.
Yeah.
Now that, Lane's an aging player. The thing that hit me when he's laying on the ground, and I would imagine beating a team 700-0 in the locker room, it's not going to be as joyous as sometimes they can be with Dan Campbell. It's going to be a weird vibe for them. I think the team and their general manager comes from the Rams, Brad Quinn, is that his name? And he's seen
Brad Holmes, I think.
Brad Quinn, yeah, or excuse me, Brad Holmes. And he saw Les and Sean and that operation get really aggressive over the years. And he was part of an aggressive trade when they did the Matt Stafford, Jared Goff trade. Don't you call the Raiders? I mean, that thing is that's a tire fire burning even stronger by the week. And just say, hey, listen, we'll give you 2 1s for Max Crosby.
Yeah.
Seriously. Max Crosby played his college football at a smaller school in Michigan.
Yeah.
The Raiders are going nowhere with him. Obviously, Devontae separate, but hey, because you can't. You have games like today before he's laying there on the ground, and some of their players are in tears. I mean, Jared Goff looked like he was crying because Jared's no dummy. Like he's been to a Super Bowl. He got close last year. He knows that's their best player on their team at the most important non-quarterback position in the NFL. Laying there with, we obviously didn't see the replay. What I would imagine, and there might have been a bone sticking out of his leg. Right? It took a long time for them to get him in the car.
Well, Fox wouldn't show it.
Yeah, so if you told me it was a compound fracture, that's kind of what I expected. To me, Max Crosby honestly kind of fits their ethos and their culture. Like if I'm the Lions, Max Crosby makes more sense than giving the farm for Micah Parsons, who's a little bit more of a one-trick pony. Would you offer 2 1s for Max Crosby? Obviously there's financials, situations there, but I think I would go all in on this because if you're Detroit, you're thinking if our defense 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago against Geno was like, what the hell's this? You can't win a Super Bowl when you can't cover. But if you subtract that game, they've been actually pretty good on defense. Like they look like a different team today. But you're not winning a Super Bowl, I don't think, with him gone for the year with no replacement. And to me, Max Crosby would be worth it to quote unquote overspend a little bit to get him.
Yeah, and also, the Raiders would do it because they want multiple ones because they want to be able to have chess pieces to move up the board if they're like 4th or 5th. I mean, they're going to get a quarterback. That's obvious. No, I think that's a great. I think there's a couple of things that are going to happen at the trade deadline. So the Cowboys are humiliated. Max Crosby to the Lions, I think, is a kind of a sharp suggestion. So there's no order we have to go in today. I do want to go back. I want to go to the Chicago-Jacksonville game because I don't know if I've felt this way about the Chicago Bears, and I'm not joking, in a decade. So 35-16 over Jacksonville. Listen, Caleb's gotten better every week, and Jacksonville, Doug Pederson's probably the next coach to get fired. I mean, they don't do anything well. But, John, you start looking at that performance today, over the last 3 to 4 weeks, his confidence, and I think some of that stuff was generated from scheme and play calling. Some of it wasn't. But 23 of 27, 4 TDs, 50% on third down. And by the way, Keenan Allen is back today. I looked at that Chicago team and I'm like, has any other team in the league gotten noticeably better 4 to 5 weeks in a row?
Can I push back a little bit?
Sure.
Because I do think, listen, part of making the playoffs, especially with a team like the Bears who haven't been good in a long time, you're going to have to, you're playing a last place schedule, win games against bad teams. I mean, to get to 9-10 wins, 5 of them are going to come against crappy opponents. And they're doing that, so they deserve credit. Their 4 wins come against 4 teams who have each won 1 game, right? The Jags are terrible. The Panthers are probably worse. The Titans are probably worse than both of them. We're talking bad teams. Now,
right.
This is not college. You don't set your schedule here, so you just play the way it breaks. They play down the stretch. If they do this, some games against the Lions, against Minnesota, I'll be the first to say this would be a scary team in the playoffs. They go a stretch where they basically play 6 divisional games, all starting within in 3 weeks from now with the Packers till the end of the season with the 49ers thrown in there. I'll be very interested to see how they look. because we've seen him against one good team this year. Now,
Yeah.
like you said, young quarterback, new to the NFL. Listen, I'm not trying to act like you shouldn't put all your eggs in the basket on the game September 10th more than the middle of October with a rookie quarterback, but they got destroyed against the Texans, who are a
Yes.
clear playoff team. So they're doing what they're supposed to do. They clearly have a lot of confidence. The wide receivers, Caleb, to me, he's much, I would say, feels more comfortable throwing the ball downfield.
No, and by the way, he's developed a relationship now with two players, Cole Kmet and DJ Moore. He is clearly comfortable. Now, Keenan Allen's probably a progression in 3 weeks, but there is something to be said. Like, he made a couple throws to Cole Kmet today, and it's like, okay, he's found his tight end. He's got his deep threat. Sometimes it takes, like Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton. Obviously, Bo trusts him, doesn't trust the other guys. I don't know. I kind of look at it and I think to myself, they'll probably go 2-4 against those teams in their division. But I do think.
But if they go 2-4, they're probably in the playoffs because they got some other crappy teams coming up on the schedule. And if they were to beat Washington, I think they play them next week. All of a sudden, you're looking, they would only have to go 2-4. And if they beat, I think they got Seattle late in the year to get to 9 wins. And that's probably a wild card spot. So to me, there's a big difference 2-4 and like, is 0-6. Because to me, you look at their division, they're the 4th best team.
What?
Obviously,
that's the best division. That's the best division now, easily in the NFL. Easily.
Which isn't a bad thing to say because you go, well, the Packers obviously are good. The Lions, if they can somehow get a replacement for Hutchinson or a juggernaut, and the Vikings haven't lost a game and are one of the best coached teams in the league. So I'm torn with them because I tip your hat, you do what you're supposed to do, but they're doing it against the number one teams you would want to play for. Like, we need a win this week. You would sign up for the teams they're playing. They play the Patriots in a couple weeks. There's another win.
I will say this. Eberflus is interesting because, like Robert Saleh, I think he's really good on his side of the ball. And the difference is Aaron doesn't extend the pocket like Caleb. And, Caleb today, I just told you the numbers. I mean, he was almost like perfect. Even his post-game interview, like he's confident without being obnoxious. Like, he's getting very comfortable. Even after Justin Fields wins, I felt they were a little bit of a mirage. I'd be like, okay, like today, today Caleb sat in the pocket, and clearly is connecting with his guys. And I'm like, he can sit in the pocket and throw.
Totally agree. And I'm not comparing them to last year's fraudulent wins with the Chicago Bears. I'm just saying that the power of their opponents has a little feel. We're seeing what's happening with Lane and Ole Miss. You watch the first 4 weeks, you're like, gee, this team could go 11-1. All of a sudden, they start playing some better teams, and now you're like, are they going to get to 9-3? And it's because of the talent and, the strength of the teams they have to go through, starting with their division and the 49ers. And it's just, we've seen them play one good team, and I put it more on the coaching staff too. Warner said something that, have you ever flown JSX? You ever heard of that?
Yeah.
It's incredible. And they use Starlink. I was on the plane today. You could watch it. It was like faster than my TV at my house. And I'm watching the game, and Warner's like, you know what Shane Waldron told me? He doesn't script any plays. And you can tell Warner it's a little weird. Most coaches do the first 15. He's just a feel guy. And I'm like, Kyle Shanahan scripts the second half as well at halftime. Most coaches go back to Bill Walsh. So that's just, you're a feel coach, offensive guy with a young quarterback, but you Kmet, stud. Obviously, Keenan back. They've developed a little chemistry, Rome and Caleb, and DJ is a special player. So they just have so many weapons. Can the O-line hold up against the better teams they play and not get Caleb killed, which we saw in the one primetime game?
Yeah.
Because when he's comfortable, some of the touch passes today were not there 3 or 4 weeks ago, regardless who he's throwing against. I agree.
He made a throw last week, DJ Moore back to the end zone. That was like a veteran play. That was a Mahomes throw. That was like, okay, that's a big boy throw. Today, he wasn't forced into that situation much, but okay, Can
we have a conversation about the other quarterback though, really quick? It was on the other side. Trevor Lawrence.
Well, first of all, that staff, it's not working. Doug Pederson had a reputation. So I was totally wrong. I thought he was a perfect fit. Kind of a casual guy. I thought it was going to work. But, when he went to Philadelphia, it worked because Laurie and Howie are so intense and so they're hovering over the franchise, right? Like, you know that. I mean, everybody in Philly, we know their security guy. And the talk radio is on you if you have one bad situational series. Philadelphia holds its coaches responsible. You go down to Jacksonville, nobody's paying attention, and it's like the worst of Doug Pederson's come out. They're loose. They're not good on details. That was the knock when he went to Philly. It's like, Andy's calling the plays. He loves to give guys ice cream. He's always rewarding him. He's like the stepdad everybody loves. You can't do that in Philadelphia. You'll get your ass wrung out by WIP radio, the fans. I mean, that's it. Philadelphia is one of those cities, they hold you accountable. Jacksonville doesn't. And I think the team just feels loose and inefficient.
I don't disagree with anyone that makes the argument. By the time, if someone's listening to this Monday morning at breakfast, he might get relieved of his duties. I do think, though, watching Trevor Lawrence, like separate from coaching, just to make basic passes. And there were times today where his guys, it's the NFL, had some bad drops. So I'm not acting like this guy's Jamarcus Russell here or Joey Harrington. But for someone that got $200 million based on, I would say, limited production and success, it did feel a little bit like what bad NBA teams do, like the Washington Wizards when they gave Bradley Beal $250 million. And I don't know if this is going to work in that operation.
That's right.
And listen, I think at this point in time, I don't think it's really debatable that his career has been a borderline. I mean, for him, not really. He's made a bunch of money, but as a player, the hype was very similar to Andrew Luck. And you watch the guy play, he's not even in the same, he wasn't even on the same level as Caleb Williams that a lot of people were making fun of like 3 weeks previously.
Oh, Caleb was, there's sometimes, John, something happens where there's a convergence of things, either good or bad. So you have sort of casual, not tight on the details, Doug Pederson, a quarterback who reportedly likes the game, doesn't live for it, a media that's toothless, and a market nobody pays attention to. So if you have a bad series, nobody calls you out. And they've all joined together. And it's what happened. It's why Nick Saban and guys like Nick Saban, after wins, call good press, rat poison, is that everybody acts the same way when they lose. They're pissed. But when you win, do you get sloppy and lazy? And Jacksonville feels like a sloppy franchise to me. All these things converge. A quarterback that likes the game, but that was the knock. That was the knock very early in his career. Like, he doesn't live for it. He's not obsessed by it. And Breeze was obsessed. Manning was, Mahomes is obsessed. And I just think all these things are adding up to a big soft pillow of a team.
Yeah, to me, just their record speaks for itself since the Khans have owned the family. Just Google where they've drafted every single year. I mean, the majority, not the top 10, it's the top 5. Yeah. I mean, that's hard to do.
All right. He's a former scout for the Eagles. Philadelphia 20, Cleveland 16. Deshaun Watson, we could go on. I mean, he's playing because the owner wants him to play, and Kevin Stefanski's taken the sword for the organization. Deshaun just can't play. But it is interesting about Philly. So they were an 8.5-point favorite today, and J-Mac was all over this, and I'm like, I'm not taking an 8.5-point favorite because Philadelphia is weird. So if you didn't watch the game, and I said Jalen Hurts was 16 of 25, 14 rushes, 264, 2 TDs, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith had touchdowns, you would think, Jesus, they look great. When I watch them, I'll get to Sirianni in a second. But when I watch Philadelphia, I feel like they leave so much on the floor, so much on the table. Is that, first of all, they're not the same team without A.J. Brown. He's clearly a difference maker. Very rarely does a receiver have that kind of impact. I mean, Brandon Ayuk didn't do squat for weeks. San Francisco could still score points. CeeDee Lamb, you take him out, Dallas can't score. I mean, and A.J. Brown is really, I mean, I've never seen a coach, when he loses a player, act like Mike Vrabel did when they lost A.J. Brown. Like, Vrabel was like, okay, I can't. Remember that press conference? It's like, I can't win here. Like, it's over. And Vrabel's not somebody who loves, outspoken receivers. That's not his game. So, but 2016, I look at Philadelphia and I think the coach is screaming at fans. I feel like the roster's closer to an A and the performance always feels like a B. Am I wrong?
Yeah, to me, the quarterback, like you said, we can get into Sirianni here in a minute. If we just use Jalen in a vacuum, well, three of the plays, he hit A.J. Brown twice on big go routes, and then he hit Devontae Adams or Devontae Smith on a big play. So what does that account for?
Yeah.
125, 130 of the
I mean,
260
those guys had
yards.
between the two 175 yards.
Yeah. So uh, to me, he's a go ball thrower, which when all you do is throw go ball, this isn't college or high school, that those don't hit often in the pros, and
Yeah.
kind of a scramble run around guy. He cannot pick you apart in the pocket. There was one
No.
point in time today in the game where I think Vilma was like, I don't know why these fans are booing. You don't know why. It's 13-10 against the Browns. They can't move the ball, and the ball's flying all over the place. There is no rhythm to their offense. It looks very similar as it did last year. And at one point in time, I looked down at the box score. I'm like, I'd have to find a way to get the ball to Saquon even more. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes coaches, he had, when I looked down, he was like 15 rushes and he was averaging a little less than 3 yards a carry.
Yeah.
So most coaches freak out and go, this isn't working. Well, you don't have Peyton Manning or Tom Brady slinging the pill around. So just keep the Kyle Shanahan's, McVay back when he had Todd Gurley, they will stick with it because whenever you have Derrick Henry, eventually the guy might break a play for 30 yards, slows down the game, makes it easier on your quarterback. And I think they have been way too quick to get away from Saquon because really the only passes they're hitting are these kind of bombs down the field.
Yeah.
It's why when you remove AJ, they look even worse. I mean, if AJ obviously had been hurt like he had previous weeks, I
Yeah.
think they lose today.
Let me give you a comp. If their defense was the Legion of Boom in Seattle, they could win a Super Bowl. Because when you go back and look at Russell Wilson's career, what we know now happened late in Seattle, Denver, and Pittsburgh. He was great with the rainbow throws over the top,
Yeah.
or when he was moving. He had a great running back. But if you ask Russell to sit in the pocket, Pete Carroll and John Snyder and Peyton were like, it doesn't work. So Philadelphia has not had a great defense, especially in the back end. So they lose, they give up points. But for years and years, I said this Friday on the show, is I was fooled. I thought Russ was engineering stuff. Let Russ cook. I bought into it. And then all of a sudden you're like, boy, when you take away that defense and Marshawn, you're like, oh no, he can't go toe-to-toe with the big guys from the pocket. If you can contain him, bring the rush ends in and just box him in. Russell's a very ineffective player. Tua is a better pocket guy than Russell Wilson. And I look at Jalen Hurts and I see a little Russell Wilson where over the top, yes, surrounded with good God, he had the best center in a decade. Lane Johnson, A.J. Brown. It's easy to look like it's you. But to your point, in the pocket, I don't trust him.
Well, that's the thing watching Washington play today. Jaden is such a better thrower standing there within the tackle box. It's not really even close. Well, he's got a better arm. He's more naturally accurate. Most people thought, whenever you text people in the league when Jalen Hurts is struggling, they all go, yeah, it kind of reminds me of Oklahoma again. Kind of reminds me of the guy that everyone scouted and thought, when he got drafted second round, the Eagles didn't just get questioned because they drafted a quarterback in the second round when they had Wentz. It was they took him that high. It was like, damn. And sometimes it comes out like he's not a great thrower of the football. Obviously, he throws a good go ball, but just a good thrower of the football in the pocket. We just talked about Kirk Cousins. I had Jay Gruden on the pod like a month ago. He's like, if you don't touch him, he might be the best 7-on-7 player in the league, right? Just throwing, he's a good thrower of the football. Jalen, I don't know if he's not comfortable. It's not natural. He doesn't have great velocity on just sitting in the pocket throws, which is weird for a guy that does have a powerful arm on the loop throw. Russell had a better ball in his prime than Jalen, just throwing like an out route or whatever. He just wasn't that comfortable throwing it over the middle from the pocket because he couldn't see. Jalen's a little shorter. He's taller than Russell, but shorter than average quarterback. So maybe it's just not as comfortable seeing stuff because he clearly, when he moves, is better outside the tackles making plays. But you can't run a consistent offense playing that way. It's very, very difficult. So now it's going to be another coach or a coordinator's fault. Maybe it's just the player.
Yeah. Let me ask you. So Sirianni, knowing he's on the hot seat, knowing that his sort of demeanor has been dubbed juvenile, comes in, shaves his head, at one point yelling at fans. To me, it's just, bro, you're the head football coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. It just feels like he doesn't have a self-awareness It's almost like Baker's first couple years in the league. You knew he was talented, but you're like, dude, you're starting fires at the podium on Wednesday. You don't have to win and be the snarkiest, funniest guy at the podium. Just let other people win. And now Baker's matured, but I feel like Nick sometimes doesn't get it.
Yeah, to me, I don't know if there's a wager you can place with our friends at DraftKings, but I think he's a borderline lock to not be the head coach for the Eagles in 2025.
Yeah.
And that's not making a prediction. They're missing the playoffs, making the playoffs. Like, he will not be the coach next year. Like, this thing, him screaming at the fans is just, in what world, in a game that you barely just beat, what many consider is one of the worst transactions, not in the football, in like sports history, with Deshaun Watson, the quarterback, who was pretty bad today again, and you are struggling to win the game and you're screaming at the fans. It'd be one thing if he was kicking ass and they're still chanting fire Sirianni. I would get it. It's like, bro, let's cool our jets here. Now, I saw Jalen Hurts said after the game, is one thing that the players talked to Nick about during the bye week was to get back to his crazy ways, get back to his roots of being emotional. He had been too, I don't know, stoic, I guess, for their taste over the beginning of this season. But if that's what you're trying to get back to, like, what are we doing? I see under no scenario. This team's not winning the Super Bowl, so no. I just don't see how Sirianni knows what's going on. The head shave. What did that symbolize to you? A guy searching, a guy maybe he got a bad haircut. I mean,
remember when Robert Saleh came in with the black beard, like darkened his beard, and it's just like, bro, you're on camera like 12 minutes on national TV on an NFL game every week. It did feel like you were trying to make some sort of statement. And I mean, I think we know now that Saleh, Adam Schefter reported that he was affected by the noise. I think Sirianni's affected. I think Philadelphia is probably the loudest NFL city because talk radio is so powerful in that city, and the media, there's multiple newspapers. It's a kind of a working class for a big sophisticated city. It's it's loud. And if Andy Reid could shut it out, but I think it affects Sirianni.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for every city in America, but there can't be many places where every single person in the city, I mean, there's just nothing more important. And it's a diehard football, or I mean, just sports town, where you could find the richest guy in the nicest neighborhood, and you could find the poorest guy on the street, and they'd all have a take on the Eagles. And Andy's just had a little thicker skin, obviously had early success. He's just, I mean, a much higher level guy. But I think when you're really emotional like that in an emotional place, it's probably not a good combination. And let's face it, like some guys with more experience and who have been around the block, like Vrabel would be more equipped to handle it. Obviously, Belichick, these guys. This is a guy that 6-7 years ago was a position coach no one had ever heard of. And all of a sudden you get thrust into the limelight with a team that then is highly compensated, a lot of star power. It's not like this is the little engine that could. You look around, high draft picks on defense everywhere, highly paid wideouts, star running back, $50 million quarterback, a GM that everyone knows his name, wheeler and dealer, an owner that is giving you an unlimited checkbook. I thought today, when it was like 13-10 and the Browns were driving, and I think it was headed to the fourth quarter, I'm like, he might have 15 minutes left for this job. If he loses this game to the Browns and Deshaun Watson, and given their touchdown came off a blocked field goal touchdown, I could see Jeffrey Lurie. I don't know exactly who he would elevate, Fangio, Kellen, but I could just see him like, this is over. And Nick Sirianni, honestly, could have been fired before Doug Pederson if he had lost that. That was an enormous win just to keep the guy's career going, Colin.
Forced to go rogue, hunted from within. This is Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Developed by Treyarch and Raven, Black Ops 6 is a mind-bending narrative and unbound by the rules of engagement. This is signature Black Ops. Dynamic moment-to-moment gameplay, including a variety of play spaces, blockbuster set pieces, action-packed moments, high-stakes heists, cloak and dagger spy activity. Best-in-class multiplayer experience. You'll test your skills across 16 new maps at launch, including 12-course 6v6 maps and 4-strike maps that can only be played 2v2 or 6v6, marking the epic return of round-based zombies, the fan-favorite mode where players will take down hordes of the undead in 2 brand-new maps at launch. You can look forward to even more exciting maps and groundbreaking experiences, dropping into both multiplayer and zombie. So Call of Duty Black Ops 6, spy action thriller set in the 90s by the end of the Cold War, the rise of the U.S. as a single superpower. Head over to callofduty.com/Black Ops 6. Pre-order Call of Duty, available October 25th. Okay, Green Bay 34, Arizona 13. So this was my favorite pick of the week on my Blazing Five. I went 3-0 today. I have the Jets plus the points tomorrow, so it was a good day. So the reason I took Green Bay, because Arizona beat San Francisco, and you think, oh, okay, and they're getting 5 points. I don't trust them. I think Kyler Murray, and I have this sourced from a player, a coach, and an executive, is not terribly mature nor totally accountable. He's just absolutely gifted. And off a win over the Niners, they didn't look like they had 13 penalties. I think they've trailed at one point like 24-3 I mean, they were getting shelled. They didn't look like they prepared. And this is why I bet against them, is that as Green Bay in their division is looking around thinking, hey, Jordan, we got to get this thing rolling. Our division's good. Arizona beat San Francisco. It looked like they took the week off of practice. And I think a lot of it's Kyler Murray, who I've defended. But John, when they only had 23 minutes time of possession. Now Harrison got hurt. They had, Connor, they got beat up. But that's the NFL. But I think there is something I really believe, and I've heard this again from a star player, an executive, and a coach in that organization. Kingsbury was ready to go to Colt McCoy. I was told that by somebody around his staff, like he was done with it. He played nice to the media. He was done with it. I know they moved off Josh Rosen, and I know they're paying Kyler Murray. I don't know if you can ever win big time with him. We'll get to Green Bay in a second, but they have too much talent to just not even compete for the first half.
Yeah, to me, I think if you remove a couple of those Bruce Arians, Todd Bowles years with Carson Palmer, this organization most of my life has just kind of been the same. And this team specifically has more talent than some of the crappy Cardinal teams over the decades. Yeah. But when I saw the weather and those guys bundled up, I thought, my cousin was on the Fresno State team that almost beat USC in the height of their dynasty in 2005. Yeah. And they went toe-to-toe with them, and they were 15th in the country, and after that loss, they didn't even move in the rankings. The next week, they played Reno, and this was like, early November. It was freezing cold. He said the moment our first two guys stepped off the plane, and it was freezing cold, they freaked out. He's like, oh, we knew we had no chance, and they got blown out. And because coming from, Fresno was like 85, 90 degrees. And when I saw that weather, when I got off the plane today, it was pretty hot. Started sweating pretty quickly. And that's a bad, this is not going to be a team that travels well, because he's a roller coaster player to begin with. A lot of his plays, like Jalen, come from kind of freelancing. Let's face it. And they have shown this year, when they play well and show a little fight and he gets,
and they're healthy,
kind of freelancing, he can make plays. They've also got boat raced a couple times and look completely lifeless. And today, I would say about 10 minutes into that game, you probably, if you didn't want to watch Jordan Love and weren't a Packer fan, the game was irrelevant because they were going to toy with them. It was a joke. So, it always starts with your highest paid player, how much he cares, how hard he wants it. I do think it's just a very hard player to play with, the way he plays. I mean, a lot of his great highlights, when you think about it over the years, are kind of freelance plays, not necessarily like 3-step drop, great hitch, hit the out route. That's not really his style.
Green Bay's obviously good. The question with me, because I think Jordan Love's a little more Favre than Aaron Rodgers. He had a ball up the sideline today. He just threw a hot air balloon up. Dobbs made the catch, kind of clever, got into the end zone. I'm like, that's not a great
He's done it like 15 times this season, and he's missed a couple games.
So he lets it rip, and I like that about him. And that was the thing on Utah State. People were like, he's going to make some bad throws, but Mahomes has a crappy pick every weekend. So I kind of live with it if you have some it. And I think Jordan's got a lot of it. There are so many mouths to feed. I mean, they have like 2 or 3 tight ends I like. There's a lot of mouths to feed, and there are a lot of young guys, and none of them have been paid yet. And there was a rumor that Romeo Dobbs was unhappy like last week or the week before. And Green Bay is like a low ego franchise, but generally there's a pecking order to an organization. Well, outside of Jordan, nobody's getting paid offensively. And I'm interested to, I know they're talented. Are they a Super Bowl team? Do they have the maturity to go on the road? What do you make of them?
I think they definitely have the talent to be a Super Bowl contender.
Yes,
And to
talent.
make a run in the NFC. And it all comes down to like they beat the Niners last year. If Jordan doesn't get kind of squirrely down the stretch
Yeah.
of that game. So to me, can he get on a streak for a 3-game stretch like Joe Flacco or Eli Manning? Because he's probably more talented than those guys I just listed, right? Just in terms of mobility, arm strength. Like you said, he's more Favre than Rodgers. The problem when you play like that, some of Favre's most iconic moments actually went against him, right? Crazy picks in playoff games because they're in the playoffs, right? And depending, once all these teams start playing each other, like they could still win the division. There's now that Hutchinson's injured, we'll see as Minnesota plays better teams what it looks like. And I'm not trying to diminish anything they've done, but we'll see how long. Like, are they just gonna roll to 15 wins, or what happens when they have a 2-game losing streak? The Packers, these guys now have been through a lot together, like the
Yeah.
young nucleus. So I like them. I mean, you watch them on days like today, it's like, damn, they could score on anybody because they got wide receivers for days. And like you said, that quarterback, their coach is really good. Like LaFleur has really established himself. He doesn't get the credit as McVay or Kyle, even Kevin O'Connell. But never forget, he's won some playoff games. I know he hasn't been to the Super Bowl, but him and Aaron, he resurrected Aaron's career and then took Jordan Love from last year, crappy first half. The GM saying, yeah, we'll see how these last 10 games go, right? Basically saying this guy's career as our starting quarterback's in jeopardy, to then coaching him up down the stretch to now, what's the record now? 4-2 or 3-2? Like,
Yeah.
and he's won games with Malik Willis. Like, he's got a lot of different pitches. I like the Packers coming into the season, still do. To me, usually their success also comes down to, like, does their defense come to play in big games? Because historically, with the Rodgers teams, it did not.
One year it did, and they won the Super Bowl.
The other thing for them is, now it depends on seeding. Like, they might be better on the road. Like, go to Dallas in a dome, go to Minnesota in a dome.
Yeah.
They have always this great passing game.
Yeah.
And then when they get the number 1 seed or 2 seed, they play these home games and it's negative 10 degrees. So it's like, well, you're not going to throw for 300 yards in this.
Yeah.
Where you put them last year in Dallas, it's like, okay, throw it away. They don't mind going out to San Francisco in January when it's, 67 degrees at kickoff. They're better off playing. I know LA won't have a home game, but a game like that than actually playing Minnesota. I don't think they would be uncomfortable playing at Minnesota in a playoff game at all. They would much rather. I think the way they're built offensively, they're better suited to go to one of these warmer weather cities on the road in a playoff game where if he gets hot, they can easily score 30 points.
Okay, my controversial take of the week, LA Chargers beat Denver 23-16, got off to a huge lead and held on. So we did something this week, I think it was Friday on the show, and I was saying, would I take Brock
Purdy
Purdy
sucks.
Well, no. So I take Purdy almost over. I'm not taking him over Lamar or Mahomes or Allen, but there's a lot of guys in there like Caleb Williams. I said, I think Caleb's more talented, or Jaden Daniels. I think Jaden's more talented. And nobody really had a reaction until I said, Bo Nix, I would take him over Brock Purdy. So before we get to the Chargers-Denver game, one of the things I think a lot about is there is a huge difference. The Niner quarterback position, and Brock clearly had a lot of college starts like Bo Nix. He throws an accurate ball. They both move way better than most people give him credit for. I mean, Bo today had a run. He was like racing past like an edge linebacker and for a first down. And I mean, it was just sprinting, and Brock Purdy moves better than people think. But I think there's two different asks in this league. And the ask for Brock Purdy was, don't screw it up. We've got an all-star team and the best scheme guy in the league. Are you good cognitively, and can you throw completions? That's also, the Niners are one of the better yards after the catch team. So there's a lot of stuff where you get yardage and guys, in Denver, it was viewed as a 5.5 win roster in Vegas. One receiver I like a lot, Cortland Sutton, a lot. Mims is unproven. Franklin's a rookie. Tight ends are okay. Left tackle's good. Right side of the O-line's wonky. And so the ask in a division with Harbaugh and Andy Reid is substantially harder. Like today, he had a terrible first half. They were missing 2 offensive line starters. Second half, he was pretty good, although the coverage changes. I didn't think it was a hot take. I think it's very close. I like Bo Nix more than Brock Purdy. One guy's a first-round pick, one guy's a 7th, but I can't hold it against him. Where to you, what is the seat? Because we don't think these guys are Mahomes. I'm guessing you think Bo Nix has a lower ceiling than Brock Purdy. That's my guess.
Yeah, I think that takes pretty insane, the information we have right now. Because I think the way you describe Brock Purdy is 2 years ago when he gets inserted after Trey Lance goes down and Jimmy Garoppolo goes down. Yeah. But if you watch the way he played last year, and if you watch the way he's playing right now, he has been pretty excellent this season.
Yeah.
Played at a really, ran circles around Seattle the other night.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we talk about Deebo Samuel, the wide receiver, like he's Jerry Rice or Randy Moss. I mean, he can't really run routes. He's not exactly Mr. Marvin Harrison Sr. out there.
Right.
Kittle's banged up a lot, obviously a good player, but a lot of teams have good tight ends. There's a ton of tight ends all over the NFL. How many guys right now are playing better than Brock Purdy? Because listen, we could say, oh, Caleb one day. Let's see Caleb win one big game. Brock's been in big games from the moment he started. In the last 2 years, starting last year and then this year, every game really matters. And if you lose, it's a disaster and Super Bowl or bust. I don't know. Bo Nix, who again, I like, that the game was over at halftime because of how shitty he was. So unless Jim Harbaugh was going to die at halftime from whatever illness he had, they were not winning that game.
But couldn't I argue this though?
But you're talking physical skill. You're talking physical skills. I'm eventually you got to play, right? So a lot of these guys at all positions have great physical skills, and then you play football. And Drew Brees didn't have the physical skills, even remove the Rodgers and the Brady, of hundreds of guys that were drafted. Maybe not 100. I don't know how many that would. Let's say 50 guys who were drafted over a decade period that should have ran circles around him and couldn't hold his jock because eventually you just got to play quarterback.
Well, but so it's a circumstance league. So Mahomes is not having a good year. He's 19th on quarterback grades with Andy Reid. Why? Weapons, circumstances. Rashee Rice hurt. Josh Allen just had a game. It's his worst as a pro. Why? Circumstances. Running backs hurt, didn't have a slot guy. So even the greatest guys in the league come down a lot when they don't have much to work with. Dak Prescott has one receiver. Dak's been bad a lot this year. Now, Dak's not Mahomes or Allen, but my point is everybody, even the greatest in the world. I mean, let's be honest. Lamar's having a great year. Well, God, Zay Flowers is one of 3 guys I trust. Mark Andrews. They have a great staff. Baltimore's got a lot of weapons.
Derrick Henry's been a home run for them.
Yeah, so Lamar's having his best year. So my take is people are forgetting Denver was a 5-win team in Vegas. Vegas only cares about. So if you take Cortland Sutton out, I'd argue they don't have a very good offensive player in the roster.
Yeah, I think when you add context to everything you're saying, I think when people see that, they go, if I would have put Bo Nix on the 2022 49ers as a rookie, are they playing Philly in the Super Bowl? Or in the NFC Championship game? And that's where Brock was uniquely suited. Now, he got a weird situation where he got to sit a lot of the year and then come in right at the peak when the team was humming. Right. But I do think if you just look at the last 2 years when he's been the full-time starter, if I'm Kyle and John, they're 5 quarterbacks. The thing with Mahomes or Allen, even Lamar, even though Lamar basically plays well every game now, it's I don't care what. I can watch Patrick Mahomes have a shitty half. It means nothing to me. It's like watching Steph Curry go 0 for 10. Josh Allen have some bad games. What are we arguing at this point? Those guys are elite. So obviously Allen, Mahomes, and Lamar are no-brainers. To me, if you can watch Herbert today when healthy with Jim Harbaugh and go, that ain't one of the best players in the league. We're not on the same wavelength. I'm not even going to speak with you because it's a waste of time. That's an elite player, and I would trade Brock Purdy for that guy, and so would Kyle and John. I would throw CJ Stroud in there, who's I think pretty special and plays in that offense and looks awesome. I don't think you could argue anyone else. Caleb, all these guys, none of them have played in a big game. I've seen Brock and I've seen Dak in big games when they both had really good teams, and one guy not screwed up and the other guy screwed up. I've seen it with Jared Goff too. Again, these are good players, but I'm giving him the nod over these guys. And that's kind of the crew. So, yeah, is Brock Purdy ever going to be the best quarterback in the league? 100% no. But is he better than most guys, like consistently from 6'7" to like 12, which I think we all kind of speak the range he's in? And that the answer is yes. And is he as big? No. Is he as strong? No. But can he play football? Can he play football? And I think the answer is a resounding yes. For a guy that is very difficult to play for, right? It's not easy to, like, it's hard to play for Andy Reid. Like, it is hard to play for Bill Walsh. That's the other thing. I think we act like it's easy to play for these guys. The way Tom would be like, this was a difficult environment. This is not, that's why so many guys fail, because cognitively and mentally, they just get wiped out. They can't handle it. And this guy, the other thing why I have so much, I say confidence speaking about him and defending him in arguments like this is obviously as a teammate, you're going to support guys. But I think there's a different level, like Trent Williams, who's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and Fred Warner, who was his number one supporter the moment he started because he saw him every day on scout team. They have been, the way they've spoke about him from day one is like, I don't think these guys just throw that out. I'm removing Kittle, who can just say whatever, or some of these other guys. I'm just talking about those two guys, first ballot Hall of Famers that aren't Mr., give you a bunch of compliments 24/7. Got a little Belichick in the way they speak about others. You really got to impress them. And it's like, and then the way Kyle talks about him. Because let's face it, like Jimmy Garoppolo, when he was good, was like a Goff Dak light kind of.
Yeah.
And Brock Purdy on his worst day is that. Like, he's so much, to me, he's a better player than Dak. And I think Dak's fine. He's a better player than Goff.
Well, he throws a better ball too. Dak's not a good thrower. Dak's never been an elite thrower ever.
But there are also like arguments like, would the Bears, like obviously the Niners, the Bears called them Caleb for Brock. They would say no, but the Bears would say no too, because they got this guy on the contract. Like, there are all these variables, and this isn't the NBA, but there is no guarantee that we'll see when Caleb plays these big games at Green Bay. I've seen Brock play these teams or against the Lions, right? Or against the Eagles. Like that's a different level than playing the Jags, who are about to fire their coach, right? That's all. That's all I'm saying. I'm not anti-Caleb or these guys, but it's
no. I think Shanahan, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, Trent Williams, and that scheme, you literally can't play the position if you can't succeed to some level. That was Trey Lance. He just couldn't make throws. So it'll be fun to play out. I think Brock Purdy's a better quarterback probably today. Bo Nix had a good second half. Game was over. It was very Chargers. Like, the Chargers, I mean, they were never in doubt losing that game, but God, did they mail it into the second half. It was the Jim Harbaugh left the field. He went to the locker room before the game. Did he throw
blue
up?
Tent also? He went to the blue tent. First coach I've ever seen go to the blue tent.
I don't even know what that, I don't want to speculate. That was odd.
Yeah.
Okay. There's two college games, because there's some games I'm not going to waste anybody's time on. So I want to talk Ohio State and Oregon. So all summer long, John, I'm sure you heard me say, Oregon's going to win in Eugene. They'll meet later. Ohio State will win. But Oregon's won now 35 of 36 games there. Even when they play poorly, they win. So Ohio State, I said, they're going to go on the road. They're going to have a bunch of penalties. They had 8. I said, clock management will be harder. Last play of the game it was. I said, it's very hard to ask a bunch of 19, 20-year-old kids to go and play in Eugene. I've sat in that stadium 10 times. You and I could be 8 feet apart. You can't hear yourself. It's sunken into the ground. It's not 100,000. It's 60, and it's just insanely loud. So, but I looked at Ohio State, and my take was, well, both the receivers, Smith and Amika, Egbuka, I think the last name is.
Yeah.
Both were sensational. One had 9 catches, one had 10. They ran the ball. Will Howard was 28 of 35. My
quarterback
take
was good, but threw it better than I thought.
Yeah, I mean, my take was, my only disappointment is Oregon averaged almost 7.5 yards a play. Dylan Gape, I mean, they had 500 yards of offense. So, and listen, I don't love that for Ohio State, because I think they have so many elite athletes. I don't think Oregon should. I mean, Oregon got pushed around by different defenses this year, including Idaho. They're obviously a better team. But my takeaway on Ohio State is they're going apoplectic. And I'm like, no, that's what it looks like when an eventual national champion plays in one of the 5 loudest stadiums against a team that's also capable of being in the Final Four. That's as good a loss as you can have.
Yeah, I I personally just hate Ohio State. This is one of those
Yeah.
teams my whole life I've just kind of rooted against. You don't really have a reason, but I'm not the biggest Chip Kelly fan either. And I wanted to hop on the bandwagon about Ryan Day and his record, but that's not the game to do it, right? You lose to Vanderbilt, like I gotta kind of eat it on anything, if you're coming at me about Kalen DeBoer. But I do think it's fair, though, at the end of the game, he has a timeout to run it out. I think there's a lot of people that I think it's up for debate a little bit. Did they mean to have the 12 guys out there? Because you can throw a penalty without it. If it does happen, it works in your favor, but it also can work against you and give them some free yardage. But regardless, for the game to end like it did, him sliding when they got a timeout in their back pocket, and let's face it, they've had some worse losses, I would say, the last couple of years to Harbaugh, much more embarrassing than that. Yeah. Honestly, when he kicks the field goal late in the game, I thought they were going to win it. Yeah. Ohio State. I was like, oh, this is going to be a crowning achievement for Ryan Day. And so it's whoever had lost that game, I think you kind of hold your head up high the next day in the meeting with your squad at noon. Yeah. But there's got to be some truth to, of all the guys that took over great programs, Urban handed it to him. And when Jim Harbaugh said, saying you're born on third base, this program, I had gone to the Cotton Bowl yesterday, and so we get to a bar after and watch the whole second half, and some people started sitting with us, a bunch of Big Ten people, and I said, you could make the argument that for the last 20, I'm not talking about total national championships, I'm just talking about effort, the money behind it, the willingness, the consistency. You could even go back to the 90s. This is the best college football program in America, Ohio State. Would you make that argument? I know Nick Saban accomplished more. But I'm just talking about the whole as a program, subtract the coach.
Yeah, I went to dinner with Mike Godfrey, the college basketball coach at Bama, North Carolina State. Yeah. And he asked me Mount Rushmore of college football programs. And I said, Bama. And the second one I said was Ohio State. Michigan was good last several years, but USC's been irrelevant for 10. Michigan doesn't have, take out the Harbaugh Natty. They went a long time without it.
Yeah.
And I said to them, Georgia went 20 years and didn't matter. I said,
probably LSU.
Bama. Well, I said Bama, Ohio State. I said, because of history, if you count 100 years, I take Notre Dame. You can't call Notre Dame is college football. I said, there isn't a 4. It depends on who's hot. LSU, Oklahoma. It could be Georgia, but there's no set in stone 4. But I think it's Bama, Ohio State, and Notre Dame, and we can argue about it. The thing is, they've struggled against top 10 teams, but the Clemson game was close. The Georgia game was close. The Michigan games, they're in it. The Oregon game. Some of these games, to be honest, they've been either on the road or neutral fields. They haven't played a lot of these top 10 teams at home.
I agree, but when, a huge thing that all these coaches love to talk about is the process, because it comes from Saban, the process. Well, he could talk about the process because his results were wins. So you wanted to know how he got there. Like, I want to know how Jeff Bezos built his business. I don't want to hear from the guy that went bankrupt. You ultimately judged on this sport, win or lose the game. And I think I think it is fair to go. And when they get in these big spots, whether it's against Georgia, whoever the teams end up being, because I think it's fair to say after watching college football over the course of so far, 5-6 weeks, it's going to be pretty, Texas is loaded. Ohio State's loaded, but they can lose. Like if Quinn Ewers is off, they could lose in the Elite 8. So can Ohio State. And you had faith Saban or Urban were going to win the game. I think it is fair for any Ohio State fan to go, I don't know for a fact. I don't feel great about my guy closing this game out, even though our team is. It's not really arguable that them and Texas have the best rosters in the country.
No, Texas and Ohio State are the best teams I've seen. Bama's defense leaks oil. Georgia's offense is limited. I think Ohio State and Texas are like a notch above everybody. I think if the Buckeyes run a neutral field, it was like a bowl game, or if it was in Columbus, they would have won that game. I think Oregon, I think that home field is literally a touchdown. I think that, I really think.
Wouldn't argue with you there.
Hey, Will Howard, despite the fact they couldn't hear, they ran the ball. Their 2 receivers were good. Howard was accurate. I came out of that game and I'm like, if they meet again, Ohio State's winning that game. And that's not a shot, because I had said, Oregon's going to win this. It's going to be close. I took the points, money line. I was like, Oregon's going to win this. I think I was kind of, they had 8 penalties, couldn't hear a couple times. I was kind of impressed with Ohio State. I really was. I was surprised. Oregon has recruited, if you don't follow Oregon football, They have the best NIL, like west of the Mississippi. I mean, they have all this Phil Knight money. Dude, they have nothing but 4 and 5 star guys. I mean, I don't think people understand how well they recruit and how well the NIL, like Oregon outside of Texas, may have the best NIL in the country.
Well, I'll say this, being at the Texas game, obviously Oklahoma, their offense is anemic, but they do
They're
have
a
a good
mess.
defense. I've been hard on this guy over the years just because he didn't win that much. Sark as a play caller is elite. Like it was really impressive. I do hesitate though, like his quarterback, I know he was coming off an injury. I'm sitting there live going, well, this ain't the number one pick. And as the game's going, when I draft this guy in the first round, and Sark was really good at kind of scheming around him, throwing a lot of, and he ran the ball. And Sark, the one thing with Ryan Day,
Yeah.
loves to pass. Sark
Yeah.
loves to pass too. Both of them probably have 4 NFL guys, two each on their team in their backfield. And that is an area, if you were just willing, you see this with Shanahan, some of these, even Andy Reid has turned in, like, just hand the ball off a lot and we'll just bludgeon you that way. And those guys are just a little more quick to let it fly. And I think that is the thing that makes me the most nervous with Day and Sark, because their teams, I mean, seeing Texas, the size of their defensive line, the speed of their DBs, the talent at wide receiver. I just think if you remove the Michigan game, who I think it's fair to say Michigan's not that good, right? So you just go, can you win a national championship with this guy playing quarterback? He's just a little erratic, but
Yeah.
their talent is really, really high. It is, to me, do you put Oregon's talent on their level,
No,
or
I
do you
think
think they
Ohio
just get a home
State's.
field boost?
I think Oregon is in the running for the third best team in the country. I think it's Texas, Ohio State, and I think there's about 4 teams, Oregon, Georgia. They can play with anybody. And I thought Oregon played their butt off. But I came out of that game. I was like, if I was Oregon, I wouldn't want to play Ohio State again. I'd have no interest playing those guys again. Okay. USC and Penn State go to overtime. It's a wild shootout. USC loses by a field goal. Lincoln Riley is now 5-8 in his last 13 games. So here's my overview, because I don't think he's terribly likable. The way he left Oklahoma, he gets snippy with the media. There's sort of an air of I'm above the fray sometimes, which I don't think people love. But here I go back to this, is that Miller Moss is a good college quarterback, but he doesn't move. He's pure pocket. That's not really Lincoln's. I mean, he went and got the UNLV guy out of the portal who moves well, which told
Yeah.
me he did have some concerns about we're just kind of a one-dimensional team. But here's what bothers me. He's been there 3 years. In an era of the transfer portal, and USC's transfer portal money is now 12, 13 million. They're not paupers. They got money. They have 2 playable offensive tackles in the program. 2. They have an immobile quarterback. The better athlete's the backup. They have 1 Woody Marks, 1 legitimate Mississippi State kid running back. This is USC. John, even when they've had coaches that have missed, I mean, Paul Hackett got Carson Palmer and Troy Polamalu. The brand is huge. If you look at Southern California recruiting this year, they're just not getting any of the players. I mean, they may have 2 of the top 12 players. There is a detached feel with Lincoln. He not that he doesn't love his job and love the kids, but he feels almost detached or above it. And it's like, sometimes I like Saban to lose his shit when he was at Bama, or Brian Kelly turn red as a plum. They're so engaged. Lincoln sometimes can come off as sort of above it all. And I think it's a turnoff to local high school coaches, and it just doesn't feel right to me.
You know who the way you just described reminds me of? The USC version that we saw with Lane Kiffin. He was kind of aloof and not connected to the program. It just felt like there was a disconnect between the two. And remember, the Lane that we've seen, Alabama, obviously at Ole Miss, feels a lot different as a human being, much more personable. I'm talking with the media, connecting with people. He just feels like a different guy. And when I got to the Oklahoma game really early, and I've adopted them as my program because I know people within the program. So I was talking, and they're like, yeah, we got so many injuries. And it's like, they get hurt in practice. He's like, yeah, we practice around here now like an NFL team. And I said, a lot different than with Lincoln. And they all laughed. Like, it's a lot more physical around here.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think when you look at Kirby and Nick are defensive guys. So,
Yeah.
and Harbaugh essentially was a defensive guy too. It's inevitable their programs are going to be physical. Sark and I think Ryan Day are good examples of, they got a little Lincoln in them. They would much rather just score 50, throw the ball around. But I would say both those two guys are elite recruiters, and it matters to them a lot. And the one thing watching Sark, and I'm not trying to flip-flop on him, but I was like, this guy really embraced. I know they're good now, but you could just feel the vibe of him and his staff. Like, he likes being there. The vibe of Texas, the fans, the program. And listen, I don't like Ohio State. Ryan Day takes a lot of pride in that program. You can tell it means a lot to him.
Oh my God. Post-game interviews.
So you use the other two top offensive guys right now in the country, Ryan Day and Sark, the way you just described Lincoln. Well, those guys, I mean, feels like they're addicted to recruiting. And it's not like, all these schools got money. And then their passion for their program feels pretty deep in their soul. This is why I was against the hire. Not because Lincoln didn't have a great resume and USC shouldn't want him, but this is a small Texas kid who kind of, got to cut his teeth at Texas Tech, working his way up, and then got to inherit Oklahoma, which is an all-time great program, which is loaded with offensive weapons. A couple of them fell into their lap. Baker Mayfield just walked on the program. They didn't recruit him. He showed up he was their starter for 3 years. Yeah. Tyler was just out there. They just got him in the recruiting portal. Jalen Hurts was kicked out of Alabama. So it's like, it was kind of some unique circumstances. And now you look at this, Caleb was a good land and he kept a close relationship. But why doesn't he have 10 Calebs? Being at Oklahoma, there's Trent Williams, all these guys, like Bob Stoops over the years. When I was at Fresno State, Fresno State football meant more than his beside his family, nothing meant more to his life. When you watch Lincoln, it's like, they gave him $120 million. It was just a number he couldn't refuse,
John, USC is one of, not the best programs right now, but it's one of the 5 to 8 biggest brands in college football. And Notre Dame, Bama, Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Michigan. Those guys, when Michigan was really down, they still had Taylor Lewan going in the first round. Now, Brady Hoke, they didn't have the kind of, it took Harbaugh about 3 years to build it back up. But the first sign, you can look at a program. And they may not win national championships, and Ryan Day may lose a lot of close games to big rivals. They, the first and second round are littered with Buckeyes. There's NFL players everywhere.
Will be again
they're
this
like
year.
A receiver factor. Their receiving core this year is better than about a third of the NFL ones. USC right now has a running back in Woody Marks that's probably a 5th round guy. They have a center, Monheim, probably a 2nd or a 3rd round guy. He's probably a guard or a right tackle or a center in the NFL, probably a 3rd round guy. Kamari Ramsey's not eligible for the draft, but he's on the back end of the defense. He'll get drafted 2nd or 3rd round. He's a good player, best defensive player. That's about it, John. That's about it. So 3 years in, with the transfer portal and a healthy NIL bank, they just don't have enough good players.
Yeah, to me, you can't, I get it, recruiting sucks, but they pay you a $10, $11 million to figure this out. And if you're going to do this for a profession, you don't have a choice, right? Do you think Sark wants to be on the phone as we're speaking right now on Sunday night with some junior in high school somewhere? Of course not.
No.
But he wants to win. And I do wonder if you look back at Oklahoma, it's a unique spot for a small town. Norman, they've been good for 70 years, and it kind of recruits itself. And they were good when he took over. This thing was much more. When Sark took over Texas, I gave him a lot of. It was terrible. And within a couple of years, I'm standing there on the sideline watching the size of his offensive and defensive linemen.
Jesus!
Whoa! I bet if you look at Ohio State, and I'd have to text to get exact numbers. If I just had to guess, Texas has 5 guys that'll be drafted in the top 40. I'm not even counting the quarterback. I'm just counting skill guys, running back, probably an offensive lineman, a defensive lineman, a linebacker, may have a DB. I mean, I'm not talking quarterback. So, yeah, I mean, I think USC, I think it's so far away. Obviously, I didn't watch much of the Penn State game, but the Minnesota game, even the Michigan game, how hard they had to play to just just keep that thing close against. It was just, I don't think you can fake toughness. And I think in life, for most of our jobs, it's more mental toughness, right? It's having mental, just the ability to battle through things, tough days, the good times. Just that's most successful people. Colin Cowherd, you name it, any industry. In football, there's this balance of mental and physical toughness. And as a football coach, like Saban can't fake being a tough guy. Like when I was around Pat Hill, he's just naturally a tough guy, right? Kirby Smart is just a tough guy. And I think Sark and Ryan Day can get away with a little bit because of their programs and the economics behind it, but they recruit really hard and they try really hard. And I just look at Lincoln and go, does he care that much about recruiting? Like James Franklin, say this about him. I would imagine if you just got Lincoln and James Franklin on a whiteboard in front of like the 10 best football coaches in America and say, impress them, Lincoln's going to win.
Yeah.
But if I said, get on the phone and build a freaking team to try to win a national championship, I'll take James Franklin's roster 10 out of 10 times.
I've been in the room. I've been in a room with James Franklin once. It was at ESPN. I would about 8 years ago. And James Franklin literally walked in, huge smile, races over me, eye contact, big smile. And I remember leaving that and I'm like, I told a buddy, I'm like, no wonder he's such a great recruiter. I wanted to go play with him. In 3 seconds, eyes on me, locked, big smile. You love college football. I love you for that. And I remember thinking, oh, that's why he's got the pen. This is why he's going to be successful. Like in college, that doesn't matter in the pros, right? You select the players, but the high school players, they select you.
Yeah.
And so I don't feel that dynamic personality, and it does matter. You could make an argument. It's like Lincoln's a little Cliff Kingsbury in that I don't think Cliff liked recruiting, and I don't think he was great at the managing. And I think in the end, Cliff's smart as hell, but not everybody's the right personality. And listen, 5-8 in your last 13 games. Don't want to waste too much time talking USC, but listen, I can tell you this. They're not happy in the administration.
Well, how
they
can
spend
they
a
be?
lot of money. Boosters are not happy. John Middlekauff, Eagle Scout, 3 and Out podcast. This thing cruised. Hour 15. Flew by today, buddy.
Fight on.